Hey everyone, this is Dave here with a look at Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8, the final chapter prologue. This package is something of an interesting one, as it contains both a HD remaster of Kingdom Hearts 3D, Dream Drop Distance, along with an all-new game in the form of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep 0.2, which serves as a kind of sequel to Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance. Then we've got something called X-Back Cover, a kind of short CGI movie that fills in the backstory of what happened in the series before the original game. It's built using the same engine that powers Kingdom Hearts 3, and in terms of the overall art style, is more closely aligned with that title. This part of the game doesn't run in real time though, it is just a CG movie with the in-engine stuff being rendered offline. However, it still looks interesting and I'm sure fans will appreciate the extra story it offers up. Anyway, that's what we have included in the package. Let's get started with Birth by Sleep. This is a brand new title made specifically for PS4 hardware, and while the game doesn't match current generation standards with regards to graphical complexity, it certainly looks a lot better than, say, a straight up remaster. Detail levels are quite similar to what you'd expect on the last gen game, but we do see some improvements in terms of lighting and shader effects, which looks rather nice. It's not a visually stunning title by any means, but I think the art style and technical qualities hold up rather well for this type of game. From a technical perspective, Birth by Sleep is an interesting one. On the base PS4, the game renders out at native 1080p, so no real surprise there. Post-process anti-aliasing looks to be in effect here, which means that coverage is a bit spotty. The game features a rather crisp and clear look to it, which is nice, although there is visible shimmering across the scene, which isn't ideal. Where things get interesting is PS4 Pro. The game actually features a boost in performance over base hardware, which we'll come on to in a bit, but in terms of resolution, the game is actually running at the same 1080p that we saw on base. That's right, there is no pixel count upgrade with the PS4 Pro version, in which case any improvements to image quality is going to come down to how well your 4K screen upscales 1080p versus the Pro console. So this particular aspect of the game is rather disappointing. In fact, we feel that developers probably could have given us a lot more here, not just in terms of an actual resolution boost, but potentially with upgrades to other visual elements. But unfortunately that isn't the case, and Pro owners are stuck with exactly the same image quality you'd find on the base hardware. Not a great start then, and we can only hope that Square Enix improves upon the situation with a future patch, but we'll have to wait and see. Moving on to Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance, what we have here is a remastering of a handheld title, and Square Enix have done a pretty good job here. In terms of resolution, of course, we're looking at native 1080p on PS4 and 4K on PS4 Pro. There is no super sampling mode for 1080p TV owners here. You either get 1080p with the base, or 4K with the Pro on a 4K screen, or 1080p with the Pro on a 1080p screen. Resolution aside though, we're looking at a solid remastering effort here. Various aspects of the visuals have been upgraded to look better when running at higher pixel counts. So we have increased geometry across the characters and parts of the environment, which means smooth edges appear generally curved, rather than looking slightly blocky as they did in the original 3DS release. And this makes a huge difference here, helping to cover up some of the limitations of running on a handheld. It's not perfect and there are still some slightly edgy surfaces, but overall I think Square Enix have done a good job at upgrading the visuals to work well at high definition resolutions. Another upgrade comes in the form of higher resolution shadows that appear much better filtered on PS4 and PS4 Pro. Compared to the 3DS original, shadows appear much smoother and more defined, without the visible stair-stepping artifacts that plagued the handheld title. It's exactly the improvement you'd expect when going to a remastered presentation, and helps to give the conversion another level of refinement. Texture detail has also been ramped up. Resolution of these assets in particular has been boosted to a point where they appear pretty smooth and clear when running in 1080p or even 4K. Yes, textures do appear blurry compared to a current generation release, but they avoid the pixelation that would have happened had they just taken the original textures used on the 3DS game and stretched them out to much higher resolution geometry. It's worth stressing that the original game on 3DS runs at 400 by 240 in 2D mode, basically a slightly extended 240p mode if you will, and the assets were designed to be displayed on that screen at that resolution. Thankfully, the remastering effort means that the game does hold up rather well in HD. So far, it's a bit of a mixed bag for the collection then when it comes down to overall image quality, and unfortunately the same thing also holds true for performance. Let's start off with Birth by Sleep. Now, while the game has been developed with PS4 in mind, it doesn't have the same kind of visual quality as a current generation AAA title. And in that sense, I really expected this game to be targeting 60 frames per second on both base and PS4 Pro hardware, but unfortunately that's not the case. On base hardware, the target frame rate is 30 FPS, but as you can clearly see here, the game often struggles to deliver that presentation smoothly. The actual frame rate itself is mostly fine. A locked 30 FPS is present for 99% of the time, outside of alpha heavy effects where things can drop down to around the mid-20s. But the real issue here is frame pacing. Frames are not delivered in the usual unique duplicate cadence expected for a smooth 30 FPS update, and as a result this means there is constant stuttering on screen. This is noticeable during the cutscenes, but I found that it was most distracting during gameplay, where constantly moving the camera and darting around the screen left the stuttery experience that just, well, didn't feel very good to play. So that was certainly a disappointment when I was expecting 60 frames per second here. The PS4 Pro version does indeed run with an uncapped frame rate. 60 FPS appears to be the target, but again, frame rates really fall short here. In fact, this is perhaps even more disappointing than PS4 performance. Yes, there are moments during the cutscenes where we get a stable 60 frames per second, but for the most part this is a game which ranges between 40 and 60 FPS during general gameplay and often hovers between 45 and 50. The result is that it never feels particularly smooth. Action scenes often feel quite stuttery, and the controls, well, they generally feel quite uneven throughout. And while there are pockets of smoothness to be found, they just don't last long enough in order to provide a satisfactory experience. Moving on to Dream Drop Distance, the 3DS game, and we see a different setup in play. Essentially, we're looking at 30 FPS target for cutscenes and 60 FPS for gameplay. And there are some notable differences between base hardware and the Pro. For a start, on base hardware, the cutscenes and gameplay both play out pretty much locked at the desired frame rates. Cutscenes play out pretty much at a locked 30 FPS on base hardware. The experience is smooth and very consistent, and although it's disappointing we're not getting 60 frames per second here, it's good to see that the action plays out without any hitches. And I suspect the reason that cutscenes are locked to 30 FPS perhaps has to do with how the game was produced on the 3DS hardware. Maybe the animations or certain parts of the engine were designed to run at that frame rate. On the other hand, performance on the Pro is a little disappointing. Frame pacing issues rear their head, and that means that these sequences suffer from visible stutter, which isn't ideal, and this seems to be a common problem in certain Square Enix titles. When it comes to gameplay though, the situation is a lot better. Both base hardware and PS4 Pro deliver a locked 60 frames per second. The experience here is a lot smoother than in Birth by Sleep, and as a result the game feels a lot more polished to play. It's also worth bearing in mind that we are getting a nice upgrade over the original 3DS game, at least where gameplay is concerned. The 3DS game actually targets 30 frames per second, and while the frame rate is mostly stable, there are a few drops here and there that cause small pockets of stutter to appear. In any case, during gameplay we're looking at half the frame rate on 3DS versus 60 frames per second on the PS4 and PS4 Pro, and that certainly makes a difference. So overall it's a bit of a mixed bag where performance is concerned. I think Dream Drop Distance has the edge here in gameplay because of its solid 60 FPS update, but outside of that I think there could be some improvements, particularly on the Pro there, while Birth by Sleep really isn't as smooth as it should be. And well, to be honest, I expected things to be a little bit better in this regard, especially when this is a remaster with expanded all new content. Overall then, I think Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue is a somewhat decent release in terms of the content available. The X-Back cover nicely fills out the backstory, while the all-new Birth by Sleep 0.2 is a rather enjoyable action game. It's a nice little collection, but unfortunately there are more technical issues than what I would like to see. That said, if you don't find these kind of technical issues too distracting, it's worth checking out, but just make sure that you know what the score is here, and don't expect silky smooth performance all round. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. As usual, don't forget to like or subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if you'd like to check out the original high quality 4K source file, then have a look at digitalfoundry.net, our Patreon site, and subscribe to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.